And once again, I'd like to welcome everybody back for another episode on the Buffalo History Channel. This is Doug Ruffin, the content curator of the Buffalo History Channel. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we have another great piece of Buffalo history that we're going to talk about. Interestingly enough, this particular piece of Buffalo history actually came about at a time when I was in the process of pretty much getting I think I was should have been in the midst of produce or in the pre-production stages of the Build documentary series back in the mid 1990s. And I remember meeting this particular gentleman. Well, I formally met him during a community meeting that took place, one of the many community meetings that took place at the school that my mother was the principal of, Community School 53. I remember him getting up in the middle of the meeting. I forgot what the topic was, but he definitely made his voice heard. But at the same time, he was someone that I've known about ever since a child. Hear the name of Charley Fisher is one of the central figures and leaders of the Build organization. I am happy to have him on the Buffalo History Channel again because I mean he talked about something that had something to do with the Build organization, Afro Central. But we're going to talk a little bit more about his organizing. And during this particular time, the Build organization was not around anymore, but he was in the process of starting another organization that would follow in the legacy and footsteps of the Build organization. That organization would be called Community Voice. And he's here to talk about the Community Voice organization. And it's there was some moments, some of you that are old enough to remember. Certainly, you will remember there was a moment where they were protesting the garbage user fee, and to demonstrate, he famously laid down in front of a garbage truck. And also, people around in my age bracket will also remember him when him and his group had a hand in shutting down Jasmine Entertainment Complex. We'll talk.
That's right.
We'll talk about that. But before we go any further, I'd like to welcome him back to the Buffalo History Channel. Charley Fisher, welcome back to the Buffalo History
My
Channel.
brother Douglas Ruffin Jr. is so good to be here, moment by moment and hour by hour. When you lose your history, you lose your power. Thank God for Doug Ruffin and your work to keep our history alive.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's before we get into the community voice, we kind of like to start. I always like to give everybody a starting round to where we all have beginnings, and we know your beginning was with the Build organization. If you don't have to get into the whole story because people can scroll down to we have that episode of the Build documentary series. It should be within part 11 and part 12 where you gave your side of all the controversies and everything that happened with Build. But give us an idea. And I give our audience an idea of your time with the Build organization.
Well, Brother Ruffin, I was the 6th of 8 presidents of the Build organization. I was the 6th and the youngest. I was elected president of Build in March of 1977.
Yes.
And so the Build organization, I served 2 years as president and 2 years as executive director before relocating to Atlanta, Georgia. I returned in 1987. And when I returned, the Build organization had kind of went into they closed it down. Actually, the Build, some of the parts continued, like the Build Academy, the Juneteenth Festival, the Build Halfway House. Some of those programs continued, but the actual functioning of Build of Buffalo Inc. and the steering committee had ceased to exist. And the name Build of Buffalo, a wonderful name, was not available. So if you wanted to do some work, and reclaim the B.U.I.L.D organization name. At that time, it wasn't available. It later became available, and we made those adjustments. May I say, just lastly about this, the B.U.I.L.D organization, like so many of the IAF, Industrial Area Foundations organization, were designed to last about 10 years and literally burn up in terms of their role, as opposed to being organizations that perpetuated themselves. B.U.I.L.D, Fight in Rochester, Delta in Mississippi, Woodlawn, the organization President Obama was long associated with. These organizations were only to last for 10 years. And after the 10 years, my predecessor and director and key figure in the B.U.I.L.D history, William L. Gator, told them, they said, okay, Mr. Gator, we came in for Chicago. It's time to shut down now. B.U.I.L.D's 10 years is up. And he said, we're not shutting down anything. So with that, I won't go into the history. As you said, you can look at Buffalo History Channel and see the history of B.U.I.L.D and the many different parts that you did in a great work. But as we come to the point in return in Buffalo, B.U.I.L.D organization was still needed. Rubbing off the swords of of discontent, organizing the community, conventions and things like that were still needed. So community voice is B.U.I.L.D of Buffalo Part 2. And it's like using almost a DBA. And then later you'll see us using B.U.I.L.D organization again, B.U.I.L.D of Buffalo. But for that period of time of 1995 through 1998, after that, a group did incorporate community voice. And at that time, soon after that, the B.U.I.L.D organization resumed its role. So those were some exciting years in 95, but in 96, 97, 98, we had 3 conventions, and we called them community voice conventions, but actually, numerically, we counted them as B.U.I.L.D conventions that had stopped in 1983 and resumed in 1996, 97, 98. And what was key, Doug, is that we had Mr. Gator as the keynote speaker at our convention, though much smaller. It was held at Canisius College. Year 2, Mr. Gator had passed in 1997. So we actually honored the Gator family at that convention. And it was held at B.U.I.L.D Academy, something that he helped develop. And then the third year, in 1998, we held a fairly large convention at the Buffalo Convention Center. And that was a very controversial one, too. But by the way, B.U.I.L.D organization was always controversial. Wasn't your mainstream organization that just got along, that just had an annual banquet or something. B.U.I.L.D of Buffalo was there to make trouble, develop trouble, or organize trouble because the conditions were not the best for the community. And those conventions also spurred a lot of other development and reported out on many different issues that we had organized around the deli stores and others. And I'll let you ask about that in a minute. But it was a series of very prolific actions. And I'll be honest with you, those actions catapulted me into public office within a short-term agenda to make change. B.U.I.L.D organization and community voice was about change. If you cannot change the quality of our lives, of our leaders, you can't change the quality of our lives. Change is necessary. And so that was the mantra, and it continued in community voice.
Okay. Now you said in the community voice with your conventions, putting, putting that. What was it like to put that? I remember attending the very first one. I went to get some footage for I was still produced in the process of gathering stuff for the B.U.I.L.D documentary series, and I figured I would show up to that first convention and kind of just see what it was about. It was I saw some amazing moments. One of which being yourself and Bill Gator standing at that podium, certainly in light of some of the conflicts that you had back during the B.U.I.L.D years. It was amazing to see that. You also brought up the members of the Juneteenth committee, and they You honored Mrs. Claudia Sims as well as Mrs. Bessie Robbins. We also
Yeah.
had a seg. We've got words from Derek Bird and Daniel Adams. So we see so many ancestors that are now ancestors in that video. What was it like to just put that first one together?
Well, it was what a wonderful opportunity. Um, and you got to understand that it wasn't the same. I understand, the analogy of Jerusalem and the rebuilding of the temple after it had been destroyed. Many wept during the Bible says that the temple um, did not reach the same magnitude and luster and beauty that it had from the original temple. And those that remembered it cried. So I was disappointed that we didn't have the kind of usual big turnout. It was a sparse turnout. I mean, things had changed. It wasn't the 60s anymore or 70s. It was the 90s. And the resources that Build of Buffalo had with 2 bingo games and about $100,000 of independent operating money plus grants didn't exist anymore. The bingo money went elsewhere. So Build of Buffalo after that, or Community Voice, had to basically operate on the goodwill of a few people, on the goodwill of people who paid for a convention registration. So it wasn't the same, but still, many leaders were there, planks were adopted, various positions were taken, and the convention issues or platform committee that we had in those many Build conventions or so continued. Those conventions, particularly 1967 through 1978, those conventions in 79 also um, adopted powerful positions that the community had mandated. And from that, we went forward. Likewise, at the Community Voice Convention, Doug, one of the good things, those positions that were adopted were developed by scholars and experts. They were adopted, and many of those were implemented. But this Bill Gator said this. He said, "Listen, you all, it's good that we're together uh, and all that, but don't whistle in the wind." And what Mr. Gator was saying is, don't just go through spinning your wheels. Accomplish something. Get organized and stay organized. And he admonished us that whistling in the wind was, those examples of people who get in front of a microphone and just talk, but no action. And that drilled down in our minds, hey, wait a minute. If we're going to continue the legacy of the Build organization, we can't be about something that doesn't have action. We're going to have some real action. And in a few short months, that action took place.
Okay, and then we're gonna look back at some of that action. I'm gonna share a screen here. We're gonna do this in the form of what they call on YouTube reaction videos. So I've got this is part 13 of the Build documentary series. First of all, let me kind of go through some of this. Let me go. Let's obviously start. I think I want to start here first. Let me go further ahead. This is one of the first things I heard about was the deli protests when they were
Mhm.
outdated food. Let me make sure you can hear this. Let me know if you can hear this.
Diane Williams shops.
You can hear that?
Yes.
Okay, let me hold on.
Diane Williams shops at Allen Joe's Market all the time, but the other day she bought more than she bargained for. She got a jar of pizza sauce that she says has been expired for about 4 years.
This is ridiculous. This is 1997, the beginning of 1997, and that was 1993. If I had opened that jar and not paid attention to the date, I could have been sick right now, in the hospital, anything.
That's when Diane called Charley Fisher in the Community Voice. Last night, Fisher and other members of the Neighborhood Action Group went with Diane to the market where she allegedly bought the bad goods and rated it.
I bought this a little while ago, and this is 1989.
You see the prices reduced on it?
What? Reduced?
Yeah.
It's illegal to sell something from 1989. The city of Buffalo has to have a deli licensing law. They are selling bad food all over this community.
After the raid, the deli owner still insisted he provides good products for the people of this community.
I put in almost 15 hours a day, from 6:30 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. I do serve the people. I do. Who's going to serve them?
This home video shows how easy it is for a minor to buy alcohol at a local deli. You're watching a 16-year-old walk into the Nashwan mini market and come out with a 40-ounce bottle of malt liquor.
I went in the store and I went to the cooler and I picked up a 40-ounce St. Ice bottle and I put it on the counter, and the man picked up a bag and bagged it for me and asked me for the money. And he didn't ask for any identification. At all. At all.
I will sing, this is a day that the Lord has made.
The purchase planned by the newly formed Deli Task Force, a community group which works with police to watch city delis. In recent months, its members have demanded some owners clean up their stores, get outdated goods off the shelves, and now stop selling alcohol to minors.
And today, in Precinct 6, we're able to say to our community, our work is nearly done. We don't need to be any longer going in the stores, doing shop-ins, because we have a weapon, we have a vehicle that we can, as citizens, turn over to the authorities the proper way to deal with this.
We tried to get the deli's point of view, but managers here refused to comment. We even brought along a portable VCR for them to view the tape, but they wanted no part of it. But Buffalo police do. Deputy Commissioner Rocco Dino already took a look at it and will turn it over to the State Liquor Authority. And if it's determined Nashwan's is in violation, store owners could face stiff fines or even lose their liquor license.
All right, Charlie, your thoughts and looking back on that particular demonstration.
That demonstration began a process that ultimately closed down 23 stores all over America. The communities were invaded. What do I mean by that? From Dearborn, Michigan, into every major urban city where African Americans lived, these deli stores emerged, and there were a lot of tension. But this is the thing that I'm pointing out. God bless anyone who wants to come to America and make a better life for themselves, to work hard and all that. But don't sell bad food, drugs, and guns. And 23 stores were closed through protests. And Mr. Gator, Marion Bill, and many B.U.I.L.D organizations, Albert Cootie Blanks, and so many others, John Smith, and others said this. They said, the element of surprise, go in and be organized, have people with you and accomplish something, but place demands. And so that idea of confronting the store, you've come in this community and now you're selling bad food, drugs in the store and outside, and drugs, bad food, bad service, bad relations, soliciting women, and guns. And the community was bombarded with guns. They were, and so I know this is still very sensitive because some people feel that's race baiting, and it isn't. Anybody coming in to a community and all of a sudden you're selling food that's outdated, you're selling guns, you're selling drugs, you're disrespecting the seniors, you're putting marketing targeting at eye level for children, like K2, synthetic marijuana, all these kind of issues, rotten food, rotten meat, had to be stopped. And so, Doug, we confronted that. Sometimes we show up with 3 or 4 people and go in. I'd go in and then another 5 or 6 more, and outside would be 15 or 20 people would go in, and all of a sudden we're in the store and a camera's rolling, and somebody said, Charlie, Look at this. Look at this moldy food here. Look at this rice that's bursting open. Look at this. Look at this. These bad products. Look at all this selling Lucy diapers and that. And so, Doug, 23 stores were closed down, shut down, and out of business. Some of them even went to jail. So the effect was, you heard me say on the thing, we need a law so that we don't have to keep doing this. And the law not only did it make sure, just like a driver's license, this is how we framed it. With the driver's license, I can't sell you my driver's license. I can't give you, if you're my cousin and now you're here, here's my license. Well, that's what they were doing with these deli license, with the deli business. So you can't sell your license. It's not, you're going to pay taxes. You're going to register. And if I'm driving a car and I get too many points, if I get violations, at some point I get a letter saying, if you keep this up, your license is going to be suspended. Now, if you keep doing it, your license will be revoked. And so a store that constantly has complaints from citizens resulted in suspension and then eventually closed down. And we put people out of business who needed to be out of business. The good stores, like on Kensington and Humboldt, good stores like that never had a problem. And thank God there were some good stores. But today, Doug, there are 250 stores in the African American community, not owned by African Americans, but other people that bought these stores or opened these stores. I applaud the industriousness. I applaud the business acumen. I applaud the hard work and little pay. But still, today, with a population of 150,000 African Americans in Western New York, you don't even have 5 Black-owned deli stores. And so that's still an issue. Some things got taken care of, other things didn't. But that's an example of just one issue that becomes part and reflects a bigger problem that results in something like a law and maybe some justice for citizens.
Okay, we'll get to the next thing here. Let's see. We'll hit here next. I can vividly remember seeing this news story come across the TV set. This is when you and Community Voice marched on the Buffalo Board of Education during one of their meetings.
There's no room in the inn for outlaws. Let me say that.
Mr. Fisher, you're out of order.
But before the meeting could even begin, this outburst by well-known Buffalo activist Charley Fisher, who broke into the meeting room ranting about the issue of residency for Buffalo teachers.
And what I'm here today to say that we cannot tolerate this. There must be a residency law. And what we would like to do is say to the Board of Education, pass a strong residency law. I can't work in the city of Amherst because I live in Buffalo.
Well, board members certainly had enough of that. They called in the police to try and get rid of Mr. Fisher. But by the time police arrived at the meeting, Fisher had already disappeared, apparently out the back door here at City Hall. The residency question is something the teachers' union doesn't even want to hear about, since it argues the state of New York pays 75% of the city's budget anyway.
I think that's ridiculous. The bottom line is that you want the best and the brightest teachers regardless of where they live.
I think that, okay, that was a shout out to Malik Robinson, rest in peace. But, okay, Charlie, give us your memories of that. What brought that about?
Well, economic justice. Remind you, you are a product of B.U.I.L.D Academy. One of the great things that B.U.I.L.D organization did, which was birthed out of a protest, by the way, of the Woodline Junior High School. It's the Buffalo Teachers Federation, and I'm not trying to throw stones at them now in organized labor, but the Teachers Federation sued the B.U.I.L.D organization and Buffalo State College, but specifically the B.U.I.L.D organization, over us refusing to use a teacher's exam that later was proved unconstitutional and illegal. But it took away the right for B.U.I.L.D Academy to select its own employees. Fast forward to this issue. 2/3 of the teachers in the Buffalo Public Schools did not live in the city. No one in Buffalo was teaching in those other 41 school districts if you didn't live in their town. You lived in Amherst, you wanted to teach at Amherst, you had to live in Amherst. And so I never understood how you can come into my city and teach our children. You don't live here. By the way, 80% of the police and fire and a third of the sanitation workers did not live in the city. So this residency law of the Buffalo Board of Education, I denounced it, not just me, my organization, and we took over a meeting to get the attention. And again, it was Bill Gator who said, sometimes you got to go in the room and slam something down to get everyone's attention. Once you get the attention, maybe they'll hear you and listen to you. But if everybody's talking, you know, you're not going to get heard. And so we got the attention and pointed out 2/3 of the teachers in Buffalo, and may I say this now, in America, among Black children, 80% of the Black children in America, one estimate said, are taught by white suburban women. And again, thank God for good teachers. Thank God for good, you know, if you can teach, you can teach. A good teacher is an important asset for any school. But why is it that 80% of Black children are educated by white suburban women in America? And so at B.U.I.L.D Academy, you had a lot of Black male images in leadership. The very first principal, Outlaw, was a African American man, and then we had some great women, Mrs. Johnny Mayo and her legacy, and others, Eunice Jackson. But being able to self-determine, and this is the problem with the public schools at that time, and perhaps today too, people being accountable not necessarily to the community. And so that's why we did what we did, Doug.
Yeah, you certainly had a way with getting folks' attention. That is for sure.
And I reminded Phil Rumor, who was the president of BTF for many years, he really resented this residency. He said that was so unfair. I said, but you have nothing to say about people in Buffalo not being able to teach at none of those other school districts. If you're so concerned, then it's a two-way street. One-way streets don't work. So with that in mind, it got the attention of people.
Absolutely. This next one certainly needs no introduction. Folks, this one is probably the one that really made community voice more. This is probably one of the most famous, almost iconic stories for the Community Voice organization. Here we go.
Attempt to do just that, to take up where the B.U.I.L.D organization left off.
As soon as a garbage truck pulled up, the protest began.
We will not do it today. We will not be used. I don't want this truck to go backwards either. Stop them from going backwards and going forwards and back. I've had it with this. I've had it. We will not do it.
Moments after protest organizer Charley Fisher forced the truck to stop, Streets Commissioner Vince Lavallo arrived, shook Fisher's hand, and got his drivers out of the vehicle.
Okay, but I got to do what I got to do. That's right, you do what you got to do.
Which was to step out for an unplanned break and expected debate.
If you cut the non-essential part, it's $5 million. We propose consolidating the Erie County Youth Services with the City Division
and it hasn't happened, Charlie.
Okay, but they need to make this happen.
Yeah, but
before
Charlie,
they tax
that's not
the
going to
people.
make up $12 million.
We don't have many people can't pay it. Understand this? They can't pay it. The seniors who are getting lean, they can't pay it. And you know what? They're going to have to find another way to do this.
The hostility did not last long. Within a few minutes, the protesters and sanitation workers shook hands, and the demonstration was over.
I'm pleased about the turnout of people who came out, brothers and sisters who stood with me. I'm pleased that, this makes people aware. Sometimes you have to get the attention of them, you have to make a loud noise. Now that we have the attention, I hope people listen.
The City of Buffalo cannot survive without the user fee. It will be bankrupt without it.
And people have to learn that if we don't do this, we're in a lot of trouble in regards to our ability to remain fiscally solvent.
Poor people, residents, homeowners, and senior citizens are going to have to pay for this, and we want government off our backs and out of our pockets.
In return for the user fee, city residents have been promised better service. The street sanitation department will be run like any other business, with its goal to please the customer.
Residents have been promised they won't come home to find their trash cans tossed in the street. Sanitation crews will also have to clean up any garbage they spill.
We'll make a promise that we will put the cans up and we'll sweep up and clean up after ourselves. And, you know, there's a lot of good workers out there.
I'm a property owner too.
I can remember speaking with you on the phone the night before you did that, and I think it was a part of me that almost didn't believe you when you said you were going to do that. And lo and behold, I think I was off from work because incidentally I should have been. That was October 1996. Okay, yeah, I was working in television, but I was at Empire Sports. I wasn't at Channel 4 anymore. But lo and behold, I turned on the TV and leading story. There you were laying down in front of that garbage truck. Okay, take us all back. For those of us that remember, those of us that may be too young to remember, what was the situation with the user fees, and what was it that made you decide I'm going to take this to the next level and lay down in front of this garbage truck?
Doug, from 1832, when the city was incorporated, until 1996, when you paid your property taxes, your garbage services was included in that. And then in the middle of the night, that summer, the council adopted, in the wee hours of the night, this user fee. It had been proposed by the Erie County executive, Dennis Gorski. Mayor Anthony Masiello decided to take that. And so for Dennis Gorski, he felt my criticism of it was being critical of him. I'm the Minority and Women Business Coordinator of Erie County. That's my full-time job. And I was, in the EEO office. And so he told me that if I didn't cancel this protest, I would lose my job. And he slammed the phone down. So the next morning, I said, well, what do I have to lose? The job is gone anyways. And if it's not worth fighting for, it's not worth having. And I made the decision to confront this truck on Richlawn, one way coming towards Leroy, where my office was on Leroy. So that morning, we had probably 50 people or so waiting to see what's happening. And someone said, the truck's coming down Richlawn. And since it was a one-way narrow street, if you blocked it, it couldn't go around you. And that's what we did. And matter of fact, Darnell Pooh Jackson pulled his black stretch limousine across so the crowd, the cameras are showing me in front of the garbage truck, but a few doors down, the Leroy was blocked. And so the driver could see that. These were theatrics, perhaps. Some people said, look, Charlie, you are a hothead. You're not smooth. You're not calm. You're always screaming and hollering. But the situation was egregious. And people were upset. Taxation without representation. And the fact the user fee, Doug, was a tax by another name. Let's not call it a garbage tax. It's a user fee. And and by the way, we'll even put the cans back and clean up behind ourselves. You're telling me as a city employee, I got to negotiate with you to clean up behind yourself? I still get mad about it. As in my older age, now I'm 70. But I still think about that. And it just infuriated me. So we had to make a point. But you had the council voting for this and believing we had no other choice but to it went under a board anyways, even with
Yeah,
the user fee.
you just broke
And
it. Charlie, can you hear
so,
me?
you
Charlie,
know,
can you hear me?
yes,
Yeah,
yes, I can.
I think your video had paused. Could you just repeat, go back a little bit from what you said after? Trying to remember where you left off at.
Okay.
Just pick.
Well, the thing is that it's very, very clear that it was taxation without representation, and it was a garbage tax without being called a tax, because taxing sometimes even required a referendum or a public vote. This didn't. It didn't even have it. You just had this user fee passed in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden, if you didn't pay your user fee, we could take a lien against your house. It's one of the worst things in Buffalo's history, and it's still here. And we pay a user fee, and it's evolved for many years. We were able to keep it from being increased. It's had some increases, but the fact that this was done to people was a lightning bolt, and the community, by hundreds that night, came out that night after the protests in support of our action. Sometimes you take an action, Doug, and you really don't get the response that you like. Sometimes it's even a tepid response. Then there's always some issues that are like a lightning rod, like a bolt of lightning. This was a nationally covered scene because all the affiliates of the CBS, NBC, and ABC picked the story up. The Buffalo News ran big articles on it.
I remember.
And it was unusual. And to this day, people still remind me, Charlie Fisher, I remember when I the last few years I've been saying, well, that's just a guy that looked like me. I've been teasing people. They say, that was you? I said, no, that was just somebody that looked like me. But it was something that for an activist and organizer, you dream of. That night, Mr. Gator called me and said, Charlie, he and Camille called me, and I went over to the Bill's office at the IPE Hall at 1687 Main Street. And he said, well, young man, you did your thing. He shook my hand, said, well done. That's what every son wants from their father. From every young man wants their elders, particularly with Bill and I having had such a public spat over the B.U.I.L.D organization. For him to say that to me was priceless. But he said, you know what your next move has to be? Your next move you need to stop the traffic on the expressway, on the 33 expressway.
I was about to ask you about that. I remember that you after your situation had happened after that, and I remember you had told me about the whole dust up with Gorski and about
he fired me, but the people made him hire me back.
Yeah, and you said you were going to go. You told me that you were going to go out in a blaze of glory, and that's when you were going to block up the 33 and keep people from coming into the city.
Yeah, I called for that rally, Doug. I actually had on where Grider is, and the next street over is not Pembroke. You go down Pembroke, and it's that Fern Hill. It's Deerfield.
Deerfield.
There's a bridge. Yeah. So I had I'm sorry. At Suffolk. Suffolk was at the 33 was the city line. So I called a press conference, and I had the cameras as I stood on the bridge over the 33 and said, look at all these cars leaving Buffalo, fleeing. You've taken our money, 80% of the police and fire, 2/3 of the teachers, 1/3 of even the sanitation workers. If we couldn't get qualified sanitation workers in the city, leaving. And that decision, while well covered, was far cry from stopping the traffic. But we figured we needed about 30 cars to begin to move in that direction, block the lanes, and then bring traffic to a crawl, or otherwise somebody could have gotten killed. We didn't have the 30 cars. We didn't have the level. So we just opted to show the illustration of all these cars leaving our city, taking our money, and paying nothing. See, that's the thing, paying nothing in return for a good job. And so that's why many of us talked about some other kind of tax on those people who live in this, who don't live in the city, make the money and leave. And so I'm thankful that we did it. Phil Rumore never forgave me on that, and it ultimately cost me future public office too, Doug. I had burned some bridges, but when you're dealing with activism, and for those watching, many of our who might become future activists, you got to be prepared to pay the price. There's a cost, and even for many of my own community who love that I did it, but that's not what they were looking for in a politician. So when I ran for office, though successful on one venture citywide, many of my efforts were unsuccessful because they said, well, Charley, you know, you're too hot-headed. You're too emotional. And so there's a price to pay for your convictions. And honestly, from that action in '96 to the deli stores to Jasmine's, well, we'll talk about that. There were several things: the closing of Empire Pawn Shop, the conventions, all were pretty cool. But I had been at this for a long time. I had been president of the Rainbow Coalition, B.U.I.L.D, the Buffalo president, Rainbow Coalition president. You know, so as a president of Community Voice, as the new B.U.I.L.D organization, it was kind of easy to do these things. It was like taking candy from a baby. And we had weekly meetings. What people don't see is the weekly meetings, dozens, scores, hundreds of meetings dealing with community issues, people coming in, bringing complaints, saying this store did this, so-and-so did this, somebody did this. This happened to me at some retail store. And just we had 400 or 500 complaints, Doug, and we were investigating those and sending those committees. And those committees, when we found issues that crossed the path of many people, that's when we would take action.
Okay, and now you mentioned Jasmine Entertainment Complex.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can remember, just speaking from my own memories of it, I myself at that time was a young patron of in my early 20s at that time. I was a young patron of Jasmine's. Now it wasn't the same Jasmine's as it was when it started, I remember, because it was in 1994. I had just came back home from college after getting out of there at December of '93, and came back home to work. I was working at doing temp work at the VA hospital, and they would announce on BLK that there was this new club called Jasmine's Entertainment Complex that was opening, and a few other people. But then they also said that the admission at the time was like 20. You had to be 25 and older. So a lot of us, some of us people my age, we couldn't really get in. And I remember they would have groups like the Dramatics and the Shylights or whatever come down there. So I know somewhere down the line they relaxed the age to 21, and then we all started coming in there. And how many times did I go to Jasmine's? I think I may have went like maybe like 8, 9, or 10 times. I frequented it a fair share of times, and the only I do know that things did get a little rough up in the spot. The one con I remember wound up having to miss the Notorious B.I.G. concert because I wound up having to work. I regretted that, but I know things did get a little rough around there. So before we have you speak on it, we're gonna look, because it was surprising to me when I found out that y'all were gonna march on it. Was when I was just looking at the news. But before we have you speak on it, we're gonna replay, and this is a part in the B.U.I.L.D. documentary. We're gonna play the news story and the coverage of that that demonstration at Jasmine's Entertainment Complex. Here you go.
Jasmine nightclub is considered by some as the place to be. But Charley Fisher and the Community Voice say it's also a place for violence.
This is a nightclub that we have discovered has had not only a host of shootings and violence, it's unsafe and reckless there, but this is also a nightclub that has young people in here underage. I don't care how much money they spend on the radio, I don't care how big time they are, they're going to have to close down. Cease and desist and get out of this community. Get on out of here. You can't
Charley
do anything
Fisher
better
has been a passionate protester before. Seldom has Fisher sounded more irate than in his tirade against Jasmine, an East Side nightclub that has garnered plenty of bad publicity in the last 2 years. In the summer of 1995, 2 people were stabbed and another shot after a promoted concert by a rap duo was canceled. The club banned rap music, but now Fisher and other activists in Community Voice say that's not enough. They are planning a human barricade to prevent young clubgoers from going inside Jasmine this weekend, and they're demanding the city shut down what has become more of a trouble spot than a hot spot.
This is just 100 yards from a church. They should have never got a permit here in the first place. So guess what? We're here to tell Buffalo. The Community Voice says this place should not be open for business. In fact, as citizens, we take our rightful place to announce that this store needs to be closed down. This business needs to be closed down for good.
Members of Community Voice point to an incident that happened just this past Friday here at Jasmine. 4 people were shot at the club. Police say that's one of many incidents they've responded to since Jasmine opened.
Police say because Jasmine has the capacity to hold upwards of 700 people, the potential for trouble increases.
People have been assaulted, there have been fights. We've made numerous arrests over there. It's the type of call where at times 5, 6 cars are over there, and they're there for, like an hour.
Inspector Redmond says police have filed reports 3 times with the State Liquor Authority declaring the premises disorderly, but Jasmine remains open.
General Manager Sam Kadai doesn't deny that violence has erupted at Jasmine. But instead of closing the club down, he thinks that Charley Fisher and the Community Voice should work with him to stop the problem.
I respect what Mr. Fisher is doing, because that's what he wants to do. But I think he should at least call me and find out what happened.
What happened was someone was able to slip by security with a gun, but Kadai says that doesn't happen too often. In fact, every week he confiscates a number of knives and other weapons that people try to carry into the club.
I honestly can't say how he got it in the club. But it's action of this kind of individual is what discourages businessmen from coming to an area such as this and start a business and invest their money in.
You can't do anything better than have a place where drugs and guns are allowed. Get out of Dodge, get out of town.
All right, Charley, take us back to it. Tell us how it all came about and where everything went.
Well, Doug, I want your viewers to know, because many of them, some of them weren't even born when this was happening.
Right.
And so it's, or they were little children. But Jasmine's, mind you, Buffalo's till this day, in last place in black business in America, is among the highest funded cities per capita for charities. So we've learned how to beg or get money. I shouldn't just say beg. We've learned how to get through the not-for-profit arm. We've learned how to, to acquire vast resources. But in the way of business, we're in last place in black business. No black bank, no black hotel, no black grocery store, although we're changing that very soon in the Fruit Belt, actually. But that's another time and another discussion. But we're in last place. So Sam Cater, who was in, I think he was in Albany or Syracuse, he had a Gardenias, I think is the name of his spot, whatever the name of his business was. He went bankrupt, I believe. I'm not certain, but I think he went bankrupt. But the city of Buffalo gave him a guaranteed loan of $250,000. And back then, that's a lot of money. It's still nothing to sneeze at. So businesses in Buffalo couldn't get the help. And here's somebody who had a failed business in Syracuse can come in on a white horse and have a big operation like that. You heard Sam talk about, the owner talked about what he confiscates, but he had two of those machines that you had to walk through, metal detectors, and they were down. And so literally the machines weren't working, and they either set them to the side or you just walk through because the machines were working. And totally 17 people shot, stabbed, or beaten in that store. And young people by the droves who were underage, 16, 17 years of age, 15 years, in Jasmine's, funded by, in part, the city of Buffalo, by a guy not from here. And that's always going to be a tension. But where his attitude, he sounds so like, why did I talk to him? You know what he said to me? He said to us, in fact, he said it to our group, you don't even have 45 people there. I got more employees than you have protesters. And I told him, I said, talk to me in a couple of weeks. We'll see what your 45 employees can do versus what I got. And in that period of time, they were out of business because in the snow. It's November. It was cold. It's all get out. Man, it was so cold. And I had my suit and tie on. Man, it was so cold. But I had a faithful group of people. And this is the key thing about Community Voice and B.U.I.L.D. It's not the leaders. It's not the heads. It's not the presidents. It's the people who are on the line that make it happen. And we with all sincerity, told the community, listen, I know you want to get your party on, go over here and go over there. And I named the places, they named the places, but don't go here because these people, Stacy Easterly got stabbed over here. So-and-so. I named names of people that actually got jumped, stabbed, thrown out, thrown on the ear, mistreated, roughed up. And I said, this is no place for you. Please stand with me. Don't disrespect what we're doing. We're out here in the cold asking you to go somewhere else. I'm not telling you to go home and not get your party on, but don't do it here. And you know what, Doug? I always, being a Christian and a believer and having also been in a prominent Methodist church and then in a sanctified church, holiness church, the old saints would be outside in front of the establishments of sin, protesting, playing their tambourines. Well, we are out there singing songs and protesting and saying, we're fired up, we won't take it no more. We're fired up, we won't take it no more. And, many other chants and civil rights things. It was our civil rights. And we did do the protests. It's a dirty job. Someone else could have done it. But it fell to us to do it. Somebody had to do it. Somebody had to cry out. Somebody had to take a stand and mean it. And those guys like Ed and Roosevelt Wardlaw and some of that crew, some of the guys out of the B.U.I.L.D. organization. Ed Pearson, absolutely. These men were rough. They came in and slamming tables, shaking them up. You walked into social services, bust through the door, come through there like gangbusters because they were on a mission. When you have right on your side, you can do a lot of things. When you know your cause is just, and that's what I think it was. This was the protection of our people. This was a city supporting strangers from out of town, giving them our taxpayer money. But but here in Buffalo, I can't get it. I live in the city. I can't get a job, and somebody in Cheektowaga can. I work, I want to start a store. I can't get the help, but everybody else can get the help. Why is that? And that's, again, why we're in last place in Black business. And while maybe the techniques and methods were rough and maybe even played out, maybe that's not how we get down now. Maybe that's not what's in order. Maybe there's no place for, like the Black Lives Matter was an example, though. But at some point in time, when the rubber hits the road, I don't care how your faith in God is, at some point, when you're doing righteous cause, Paul said, when I would do good, evil is always present. And when you confront evil, it's going to get ugly sometime. And you have to get ugly with it.
Yeah, and I'll put something on the back end of the whole Jasmine story. After it was closed down, and you told me you were telling people to go other places. One of those other places that a lot of us went, and myself included, incidentally and interestingly enough, wound up being, of all places, the new Golden Nugget. Fridays and Saturdays, I can remember being up in there, and some of them older folks used to be pissed.
Yeah, y'all coming in our spots. Yeah, I know. I had literally about 10 places. I said, listen, here's 10 places. Fountain Blue here, this one, that one. Here's some on Bailey here. Savoy for those who want a little bit better. But I didn't say go to Larry Little's or some afterology. But I had places they could go. Mike's and
Gloves. We went up in there too.
Man, So today, again, I hope people who are going to be in the entertainment industry look back on this and understand that get your community behind you, rally your community, organize the issues. So it's not just you by yourself, because when they come down on you, there should be consequences. And what I mean by come down on you, a flat out no, denied, loan not accepted, proposal not answered, or whatever the case. Don't take no for an answer. Fight the fight that is needed. And you got to have courage. And the risk was in these spots, Doug, the risk was, you could look like a fool. You could be so embarrassed, nobody come out, the snowstorm. Instead of having 40 people there, you only got 5 people. And then, you're the laughing stock. You run a risk. What if the store, something happens, you go in a deli store and they jump on you and some of your people get hurt or worse. And I did have some death threats. Yeah, I did have death threats. This kind of stuff didn't go so well. In my days as president of B.U.I.L.D, I was accosted. Maybe we'll have the chance to talk about that. But you when you start talking about change and demand and speaking truth to power, sometimes you bark at the bear and the bear barks back. It does always just you scream and holler. Sometimes you get screamed and hollered, and there's consequences. Be prepared, count up the costs, because activism and standing for your beliefs still is important. And there's a cost that, and you run a risk. I might have been maybe much more successful in public office if I hadn't done so much of this, but I make no apologies, because deeply rooted in this, Doug Ruffin, was my faith in God and my service and following as a disciple of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. And I follow him and I follow him as my savior. So that for me, these things were righteous causes. God was with me, and I might have looked stupid and crazy to some, but when I got persecuted, I rejoiced. See, so that's part of the organizing. May I say this too? B.U.I.L.D and many of these organizations were organized by people in the faith community who are now considered part of the left. They certainly weren't right-wing evangelical, but many of them came out of the denominational mainstream denominations and were considered now the radical left. But that's another point for another time. I just love the fact on your program we can talk about history in an unmitigated way and just tell the truth without it being sliced and diced. I really appreciate that.
And what I'm going to add on the back end, the last part on the back end of the whole Jasmine scene with my age group, we went to those other spots up until the late 90s when they had opened up, when they turned the old spaghetti warehouse into well, in the beginning it was called Sweetwater's and then later became a club sensation. So that's kind of the end part on that. A few more things I wanted to bring up. You mentioned something about the Empire pawnbrokers. That's another thing that I remember. Could you remind us, fill my audience in on what that case was? I do remember it.
Remember, I told you that we were having these weekly meetings, and anyone could come before the community and file complaints. And we take these complaints, they fill it out, we tell them we're not lawyers, but we will represent you as advocates. And so I'm just going to show you an example here. I don't know if you can see that, Doug. Does it show?
Yeah.
Community voice calls for boycott of Empire 2 pawnbrokers.
Yeah.
So from a complaint from Twan Jones and his family on Glenwood Avenue, he got jumped there in the pawn shop by the owners or the people who worked in the pawn shop. And what they would do, you go in and say you pawned a ring or something. You go in there and every week pay on it till you paid it off. In this case, Twan lost his ticket, but he was still coming in every week paying. They was taking his money, He didn't have his ticket no more, but he said, well, they would say, well, you still owe $40, you still owe $20. Finally, it was down to bill is paid in full. He said, okay, here's my last payment. I'd like to get my ring or whatever it was out. And they said, well, let's see your ticket. He says, I don't have a ticket. You've been accepting my money for weeks. They said, if you don't have a ticket, you can't get nothing. So he was a young guy too. In his early 20s, he blew up. He said, give me my stuff. So they got in an argument, him and the guy, and then some others came from the back. And eventually they said, get out of the store. And Twan said, I'm not going till you give me my stuff. And he probably said it in more explicit terms. And they said, well, watch. If you don't go out, we're going to call the police. Then what they do is lock the door. So you're inside the store. These guys come around you, pushing and shoving. You get into a fight. They done lock the door. They wait for the police to come. The police come and arrest you. That kind of thing happened over and over and over again. And they were taking and fencing items, meeting at 3 a.m. Somebody would, a hype would go and steal something from somebody, bring it to the pawn shop, back door, and the guy would open it up and give him $50 for it or whatever it was. This went on and on and on. What I thought was sometimes they later sold them to police. I get a $500 item for $75. Well, needless to say, how could they continue to do this over and over again? So I went in there with a few people, and somebody was filming me. I came in, I had somebody filming me, and I approached Mr. Stanley. He was smiling and everything. I said, well, Brooke Stanley, I'm here on behalf of Twan Jones. I'm with the Community Voice Organization. His face turned beet red. And then I said, well, look, the complaint says there's always two sides to a story. What do you say? He said, I'm not going to talk to you about that. That's my business. I said, hold on, wait a minute here. I'm from the community. We're with the Community Voice, and you know, Mr. Jones said you jumped him, that you locked the door before y'all called the police, you beat him up. You never gave him his stuff. So where's his belongings? And then the owner said, get out the store, told me get out the store. I said, oh, you're on the camera now. I bet you don't lock this door. I bet you nobody touches me. And I went on and on and on. And I said, we'll be back. And that next day we came back and started protesting. He said that we were blocking his traffic. Eventually got a court order of protection saying we had to stay 75 feet from his business. So we were protesting across the street, and we counted out, Doug, this is true. We counted out 100 feet, and I was standing at the 100-foot line protesting on a microphone, and he called the police, said we had, quote, went past the line. The police took his word that it wasn't 100 feet, that it was beyond, you know, like within the 75. So in other words, I violated the court order, and he had me arrested, and they arrested me and took me down. I had our organization attorneys ready. I went to jail. It was in the article. I was still working for Erie County, arrested. And if you go to my website, my Google page, if you Google me, you'll see activists arrested. And eventually the articles went activists freed, activists not exonerated, but I forget the term they used. But it's still kind of like a stigma. My grandchildren, great-grandchildren read this and say, well, you were arrested? Almost made me like a criminal. But again, you have to be prepared to sacrifice to the listeners. If it's not worth fighting for, it's not worth having. And what are we talking about? The rights to be able to come into any business and be respected and not to be defrauded or cheated. That's wrong. And you can go to civil rights groups that might file a national lawsuit. You can get in front of groups that might write a letter. But what happens when that doesn't work? You can go to a politician's office and go there and call him 20 times, call her 20 times. No action. You can go to your church group and nothing happens. So there's a role to play to advocate. And that's what our elders of the B.U.I.L.D organization taught me and others of us, to advocate, to fight for the right. And so, you know, that's what we experienced. And Empire Pawn Shop wound up, well, I'll just tell you, I'm going to be honest with you, Doug. I'm going to just tell you the truth. The owner said he's with the mafia and he's with the witness protection program and he's going to kill me. I thought about it. I didn't know who he was. I said, he's got money. But the Lord is able to keep me. And those old folks, you say, God watches over babies. What's the phrase go? Something
over babies
and fools. And I was in that category of a fool. God watched over me. But I called up the gentleman who is the Don. His father had been Don, and he took over. And I called him up and said, Mr. So-and-so, he owned a big business too. I said, listen, this is Charley Fisher. I'm getting ready to call CNN News. I'll be on CNN News tonight and other national media because you're planning to kill me. Now, he said this to me cryptically. He said, Charley, if I was going to kill you, you'd be dead already. I said, well, then why is this business here, Empire Pawn Shop, saying that he's mafia and he's going to kill me? Is that how you do business? He said, not us. I said, well, then you need to take care of this, Mr. So-and-so. I said, so I won't go on the news tonight, but nothing better than, you better tell him to cease and desist this is the truth. God's honest truth. 2 weeks, within a week, he was arrested along with his wife. They were arrested and locked up and stayed in jail and convicted and did a bid. This same white gentleman and his wife. And the judge said, on your terms of release, you can never open a pawn shop anywhere in the world. And so there is no Empire Pawn Shop anymore by court order, not in Buffalo or anywhere else that he's part of. And so sometimes you get a win. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's a bust. Sometimes nothing happens. But every now and then, when you're fighting the good fight, you get a win, and that sustains you and keep you going. I survived the organization through simply $20 memberships. That's all I had. And we had people, and we had volunteers, and we had donations. But eventually, it wasn't sustainable. And I got elected a city council member, send the voice to City Hall. And I went there with an agenda to pass a deli licensing law, minority business law, and many other things, which we did. We passed a lot of legislation. But, how we sustain our organizations. Now, I'll say this about the NAACP. The NAACP is one of the oldest chapters in America. I know some people don't know where the office is, and they don't know this or that, or they don't like what it is. But they have an annual dinner, the Medgar Evers dinner. And that's how the NAACP survives. Because we haven't figured out how to fund our civil rights, Doug. Mr. Gator had bingo games. Without the bingo games, B.U.I.L.D organization couldn't exist. And when you get sued, as we've been sued, and you pay a lawyer, and the lawyer says, well, listen, I'm going to need $15,000 to fight the lawsuit. What do? I was sued by the Buffalo Police Benevolent, the PBA, for $2 million from my bid in my time in B.U.I.L.D the first time. And it took a number of years to get that cleared. It's a scary kind of thing when the police union sues you. So count up the cross, but still be double determined for justice. Justice now. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now.
Okay. A couple more things. Wanted to get right to this one. A couple months ago, prior to this year's Buffalo Juneteenth Festival, I posted a reel on Facebook which highlighted the 1980 Juneteenth Festival, which would have been the first one to be held in Martin Luther King Park and along Fillmore Avenue after being on Jefferson for those previous 4 years. And they got a lot of views, we got a lot of engagement online. And in the comment sections and in the shares, one of the things that got said by many people is that they saw that there was a carnival in there with a bunch of rides, and people were saying, "Wow, that's what we need. Where's the everybody saying bring back the carnival, bring back the carnival to Juneteenth." And I remember when I interviewed you back in 1996 for the B.U.I.L.D documentary series, you talked about that for the first time, and because you were working with B.U.I.L.D, I don't think you were president. I think you were executive director at the time.
Correct.
And you said that there apparently behind the scenes was an issue with the people who ran that carnival. Could you let our audience know what all that was about?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mentioned the mafia at different points in the discussion tonight, and I just call them mob related. These carnival operators were they had a reputation of putting on a good carnival. It was very popular right in the wading pool of Martin Luther King Park, right in the middle there. People loved it, but that carnival wanted control of the festival. Their demand was that what they wanted to do is take over the festival. And they had some people who worked for them, who were paid by them. And they, I went to court to protect the rights. Let me say this. To keep the B.U.I.L.D. organization's Community Development Committee sponsored the Juneteenth, 76, 77, 78, 79, 1980. And it continued, but eventually we created a separate corporation, Juneteenth Incorporated. But the Community Development Committee, a standing committee of B.U.I.L.D., is what operated it. We operated that, and Charles and Mary Hartz and many others, Turner Robinson, Mary Robinson, Bessie Robinson, many of them were part of the Juneteenth Committee. Mrs. Claudia Sims and others. But this carnival, though a nice and novel idea, turned out to be a near disaster because they weren't, this was not our theme, Juneteenth, the time of times. They had no appreciation for that. They had no respect for the Black community. They just were some hustlers. And I went to court, and frankly, we won. We won the judicial right to keep the B.U.I.L.D. organization, to keep the Juneteenth Festival, and not allow another entity to take control of it. A group that was paying some people to organize against us. I nearly lost my life in an altercation with these individuals. They jumped me at gunpoint. And someone from the NFTA had been killed, working on the light rail transit, had been killed right in front of B.U.I.L.D. headquarters, 1420 Main Street, the B.U.I.L.D. Town Hall, the old Channel 7 TV building. And I was accosted in my offices at B.U.I.L.D. I escaped, and I was accosted. And then when they were going to take me to another location, I dashed out and ran for my life. And the Lord again was with me. Something about blessing old folks, babies, and fools. I got away. I pressed charges. I went underground, if you will, in hiding. I worried about my life. I worried about retaliation. Those individuals were arrested and convicted. But these are some of the tragedies, some of the things that can happen. May I say this, though, Doug? We were on Jefferson Avenue, and again, B.U.I.L.D. organization was not a rich organization with a lot of money. We had built the festival based on concessions, people paying concessions. And so on the city space between the sidewalk and the curb, we were selling the concessions. And most instances, the business on Jefferson, in front of your business, would pay for a concession. So it worked nicely. But at some point, the business said, I ain't going to pay you a concession fee in front of my own business. I'm not going to pay you that. I'm not going to pay for a concession fee. I said, yeah, but this is what's happening. Allentown, Niagara Street, Hurdle, all of them are in fights over this. We got to have the way, that's the only way we can pay for this. Now, the Fillmore Business Association, led by Mr. Cliff Bell and others, watched the Jefferson Avenue impasse, and that those business people did not want to pay a concession fee, nor would they allow others to put their concessions in front of their business. Fillmore said, wait a minute, B.U.I.L.D. organization, listen, we would love to have the Juneteenth Festival on Fillmore Avenue. Matter of fact, we'll throw in Martin Luther King Park, and we'll pay for the concessions. We'll underwrite your costs. And so the Community Development Committee and the B.U.I.L.D. organization really had no choice. We either cancel the festival or move. And we couldn't, maybe we should have done this looking back, Doug. We should have continued to work with Jefferson Business Association. Today, the Jefferson Business Association, headed by Larry Stitt, and it's a very progressive group, a large group now. And I wish that we still could have Juneteenth on Jefferson. As a matter of fact, my dream was to have the following year, the first day on Fillmore, the second day on Jefferson, or vice versa. One day on Fillmore, one on Jefferson. And yes, it is beautiful having Martin Luther King Park. It is a wonderful thing to see the wading pool, which is now was the largest in the world. It's good to see all of that. It's good to see the various key buildings. And yet Jefferson, seeing what's going on there and what Marnetta Malcolm and those doing, they're doing a great thing on Friday nights on Jefferson Avenue. So it's still a longing and desire to be on Jefferson. But anything you do, you got to pay for it. And if you're going to do it yourself, don't let others, like a carnival or some, to the people watching this, give me the Soul Circus. And by the way, I brought the Soul Circus to Buffalo, first at Central Park Plaza, then we had it. We moved it around to different locations. You know, and so the Soul Circus, we had no problem with the carnival.
Yeah,
we weren't able to get it, but we did bring the Soul Circus here.
Yeah. Now, just for clarity, when you said that when you were accosted, was that the situation that involved Jesse Williams, and was that a different situation?
That's the situation. That's the situation.
They were carnival, or
I'll just simply say this: the carnival, by any means necessary, wanted control of the Juneteenth Festival, and they could not have it. And may I say, nobody, individuals or small groups, were going to have control of the Juneteenth Festival. Nobody, to this day, nobody controls the Juneteenth Festival. Juneteenth Inc. controls it, and those elders have captured the history. I go there without, I really don't do much in the festival, but I know in my heart that I fought to save the festival, to save it from mob-related entities like that carnival. They were just a bunch of devils.
Right.
Yeah. And again, the Bible says, don't be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. May I say this about people that I may have had altercations with? I forgive you. I hope you forgive me. Rochelle Farrell has a song, I Forgive You. And she basically says, it may never be where we get back together, but I forgive you. I got to move on with my life. And so those experiences in those days, people writing articles about some of my crazy stuff, articles talking about Charley Fisher and his hypocrisy, his crazy, what does this say here? This one says, is public focus on Arab stores tinged with jealousy and bias? By Irene Moore. The article there that was in 96 basically suggested these ugly raids by the Community Voice and Charley Fisher, or Community Voice, is because you're jealous or biased against these people, hardworking people. And I will say that to them, that hurt me. That really hurt me. The Buffalo News calling me names, and Doug, it is count up the cost. And I say, if I had to do it over, I still would. Sometimes I feel like, no, let somebody else do it. Somebody would have done it. But I got to answer to God, and I know what He called me to do. And behind these few examples are several thousand people that we worked files with and brought happy endings, getting them their job back, getting them their social services benefits back, getting their water turned on, their utilities, getting justice, class action suits. We were plaintiff in several lawsuits. All these different complaints. Charley, I need a job. Can you get my son? There's 4,000 files of people that we helped. So while you see these few examples that we talked to tonight, thank you for allowing me to share with the community about this. But to be honest, it's those 4,000 unseen files that were successfully concluded. That's my reward. And that's what God sees. And it said, don't let your left hand know what your right is doing. You know, you can't call a press conference every time you do something good. You know, you need to sometimes just do it and don't worry about getting credit for it.
Absolutely.
But, yes, sir.
And lastly, you mentioned a lot about when you ran for office and were on the Common Council. Towards the end of your tenure, there was an effort by some of the Common Council members to downsize the Buffalo Common Council, because when you came in there, you had a black majority, and then there was a downsizing and all that. Can you take us, just remind us of what all that was about?
Well, when we had the majority, I remember we also had Al Coppola voting with us. So we had a working majority. James Pitts was the independent elected council president. And so Beverly Gray and I were council members at large. And then we had a council member in Ellicott, Maston, and University District. So we had at University, we had Betty Jean Grant. Maston, we had Byron Brown. Ellicott, we had Barbara Miller Williams. So we had a working majority. When we organized that first meeting, James Pitts called the kind of caucus, and he said this, and this is kind of controversial, but I'll say it. We had to pick a successor. If something happened to the president of the council, who would become the president pro tem or vice president of the council, who would succeed him if he stepped down? And by the way, the charter says if a mayor resigns, the council president automatically fills the seat and becomes the acting mayor until the next election. So we organized, and James Pitts put Rich Fontana in as the president pro tem, and Rosa Tempio, who was also a council member at large, as the majority leader. So his view was diversity, I think. His view was, let's be smart about this. Let's, Rose is there. We need the experience. We need a working group. But Barbara Miller Williams and Betty, myself, Beverly actually wanted to put in, my view was, I understand about the majority leader, but council president pro tem, if something happens to you or you resign to take a higher office, Jim, we got to have control of that seat. So I was opposed to Rich Fontana. Later, without any fealty or loyalty, he voted, after telling us for months that he would not support the downsizing, he voted for it. So did Latempio. They backstabbed us with forked tongues. Now, I get along with Rich Fontana. I'm not grinding an axe against him. It was James Pitts who made him the council president pro tem, and no one else. And so when the time came to downsize, the people who we put in place to be our pro tem and our president pro tem and our majority leader backstabbed us and backstabbed the community, and we lost 2 of those 3 seats. Beverly Gray was heartbroken. She died hurt. She died literally a few weeks after leaving office. Beverly A. Gray, of which, of course, the old library is now named after her, the Beverly Gray Exchange, and me. So it was a loss. Later, Betty Jean Grant went on to become, in the legislature, the chair of the legislature. Barbara Miller Williams is now the city controller. We know Byron Brown, of course, had already left the council to become a state senator. He went on to become the longest serving mayor. And there was a lot of evolution, a lot of things happened. But who can tell when the things are going down how it worked. In fact, here's a picture of Beverly and myself. There's Beverly Gray and myself, Daryl Gator, Camille Gator, one of the twins. But that's Beverly A. Gray there. What a sweet woman she was. What a powerful, proud woman. And she ran for mayor in 2001, but she was sick. And unfortunately, she got very sick while running for office, and she did not win. But you never know how these things go. And looking back, we had the majority. Yes, we passed many laws. I wrote a lot of those laws because I had an attorney on staff. I didn't use the corporation counsel's lawyer. I had my own lawyer on my staff. And, we passed a lot of laws. I hope the history will serve us kindly and say that you all got in office and you did something. Yeah, you named the library, you put in money, you put your foot down, you stood for this, that, and the other. But I hope that we did. I published the African Village Directory, Business Directory. I hope people say that this was good. Yeah, that's what happened. I chaired the Black Caucus. And by the way, may I say this in closing? We were able to convene a meeting where we had not only the members of the council, the 2 Black legislators, the Black assembly person, every Black judge, every Black school board member, and every representative of the housing authority, all in one room. And that Black caucus met and we discussed many different issues. The Conference of Black Elected Democrats and COBED and other things we called ourselves. But we did meet, and I wish they would still. I wish these new people with Maston and Ellicott having 2 new, wonderfully talented ladies, and Zanetta Everhart and Leah Halton, who is the majority leader of the council, their first year. Now Howard Johnson resigning as the legislator of the 1st District to go to the Board of Elections. That seat is open. And of course, April Baskin, who is the current chairman of the legislature representing the 2nd District, she is running virtually unopposed for state senate to succeed Tim Kennedy. Should she succeed, which I'm almost certain she will, you're going to have those 2 seats open. And we just changed the 2 seats, new people in Mass and Ellicott. Those 4 seats are the core of the Black community. And change has come. What we do with that and that opportunity is up to our community. So with that, Doug, that's sort of, I want to say that I just love telling the stories. I am available for anyone that wants me. If you can maybe share my number on the screen or my email address, I love the opportunity to come with the time that I have left to answer the questions, to explain to the community, to teach a little bit, to share, to be the griot, if you will. Because Doug, I remember all that stuff. I remember meeting the Black elected, some of the very first Black, and I met Sherman Walker, the first Black elected official. Down the line, some 75 Black elected officials since 1937. And I've met almost all of them. Maybe all of them. Wow. I am ancient. So with that, thank you for letting me come on your show, come on your program. And anytime on any area that the Buffalo History Channel wants me, remember from the African tradition, it said, our history begins with the words and actions we take today. Tell our children to renew the instructions of their mothers and fathers. Irmat Jejmat.
Okay, Charlie, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, you went off the screen for a minute there. Yeah, for anyone that wants to contact Charlie H. Fisher, this is his number right here, 716-650-8889.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to have you on the Buffalo History Channel. Of course, I see you wearing the B.U.I.L.D organization T-shirt.
That's
Always
right.
representing us. Always representing us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll never forget. Thank you, my brother. Keep up the good work.